Merry Christmas. I'm Jordan Harris. You're watching Sports Truth. Today we're going to be talking about my thoughts and concerns about the 2024 recruiting cycle that's still going on, still dragging on. I know signing day was last week, but this recruiting cycle is still going on, especially when you include the transfer portal and all that stuff. So, going to cover quite a bit today. Before we get into that video, I do want to cover a couple of different things. The first thing, we are working to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so that gives us 6 days. My wife thought I was crazy for working a couple of hours today on Christmas, like prepping for the video and doing all this stuff. And I told her I made a crazy, lofty goal of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It typically takes about a year or so to get 1,000 subscribers, but we're working to get to that point by about the 2.5 month mark. So she thought I was crazy, and I told her I made a crazy goal. So if we don't meet that goal, it's not going to be due to a lack of effort. We definitely going to make that effort. And also, I know like God has done some crazier things in that. So if he's done crazier things in that, then he can make this happen too. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. Please do help us reach that goal. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. Those are the two things that help quite a bit. I do want to thank those people who have made that investment in subscribing already. And if you're wondering what that investment entails, all it entails is the click of a button. All you gotta do is just push a button. It doesn't cost you any money or anything like that. So that's one. The second thing, there's a quote. I live by quotes, kind of weird, but I live by quotes. And one of my favorite quotes is imitation is the greatest form of flattery. A lot of times I'll create videos, they'll do well, and then I'll see other people make almost the exact same video. And I'm like, that's weird. But anyway, so NMD Canes and Coach Coop, I just want to say that I am totally flattered. So I appreciate that. Okay. All right. So let's get into the video. First, let's get into my thoughts. All right. So the 2024 recruiting class, some people had it ranked, or some uh, channels had it listed as like 3. Some people said it was as high as 5, but consensus top 5 class. You got to give the coaching staff a round of applause for that, right? Especially Jason Taylor. He's been incredibly important. I mean, his name is in the Ring of Honor inside of Hard Rock Stadium, you know what I'm saying? So his name definitely helps bring some of these recruits in. So let's talk about what it takes to actually build the program to where it needs to be, and then you'll understand why I have these thoughts and these concerns based on the recruits that we have. So Alabama is the gold standard as far as I'm concerned. They have done it better than anybody has ever done it. They've been right in the middle of the championship talk for 10 plus years now. And it's not just like an outsider's chance, but they've been considered one of the favorites to win every year for the last 10 years or so. So if you wonder how they do that, first they bring in talent to fill in those gaps in the top 22, right? So they've got 11 starters on defense, 11 starters on offense. They bring in talent to fill those top 22 spots. They want to fill those top 22 spots with elite talent. And that's what Mario Cristobal is trying to do right now, bringing in these recruiting classes. After that, you want to fill in the gaps because you're going to be losing players over the years. So you see Mario Cristobal's put together 2 really good recruiting classes, and he's also used the transfer portal to put a lot of people in those top 22 spots. But as you all know, like we lose players like Leonard, we lose players like Corey Flagg, we lose quarterbacks. So when you lose those positions, you try to bring in people to fill those gaps, right? So first you fill the top 22, and then since some of those players are going to be leaving, like our safeties, right? Then you start to bring in players to fill those gaps. And that's something that Alabama has done exceptionally well. They don't just recruit really well, but they also fill in those gaps with transfers and all kind of stuff like that. Okay? So while you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're developing your players so they're not just freshmen getting thrown into a position that they're overwhelmed in, but they're also going to be building and getting into a certain level of prosperity in the positions when they get there, right? When they develop into that spot. So the last part or the next piece of it is to build depth in your roster. And this is something that Miami struggled in like crazy this past year. So if you've watched all of the Miami games, you would see The top 11 would just about compete with anybody. I'm sorry, the top 22 on our team would compete with just about anybody across the board, across the nation. The top 22. We struggle with quarterback, obviously, but everyone else, let's just say the top 21, we compete with just about anybody in the country, talent for talent. But then once one of those starters went down, like let's say if Cam Kitchens got injured and then we had to put in somebody else, you would definitely see a pretty significant drop there. Um, if one of the offensive linemen got hurt and we plugged in another offensive lineman, it was a pretty significant drop there as well. So that's what Alabama does not struggle with. That's what Georgia does not struggle with. When they have a defensive lineman get injured and they plug in the next person, it almost seems like they're just as good because they have gone 4, 5, 6 years stacking 4 and 5 star recruits on top of another. So when this 5 star recruit goes out, they've got another one who's maybe a year younger who's just as talented, and they just plug them right in there. So once again, you want to build the top 22, and then after that, you want to start getting the people to fill those holes after they start to leave, after some of those top 22 start leaving. And then you want to bring in those recruiting classes over and over and over so you can build depth over the years. And that's what Mario Cristobal seems like he's working on right now. And it looks to be going pretty well as far as I'm concerned. All right. So I know some people have concerns about Mario Cristobal. And this is just an offshoot thought that I have. Some people have concerns about Mario Cristobal, play calling and time management and all that stuff. My thought with that is if you think Nick Saban, who I think is the best to ever do it, if you think that he is perfect as far as time management, you're crazy. If you think that he's perfect as far as play calling, you're crazy. It's just that he has so much talent on his roster that sometimes it overshadows some of the mistakes that Nick Saban might make. You know what I'm saying? Also, he's not, since his talent is so superior to the teams that he's playing against, he's not going to be in these cutthroat, dire situations as often as Mario Cristobal may be in, because Mario Cristobal is playing in close games every week. But then you look at Nick Saban, his talent is so much superior than everybody else's. He only has maybe 3 or 4 really close games every year because his talent is so much superior. So that's why recruiting is so important. That's why Mario Cristobal is perfect situation as far as I'm concerned for Miami, because he's able to bring in this recruiting. He's able to bring in all this top talent. And once we do start stacking these classes on top of one another, then like if he does mess up on a play or if he messes up on some type of time management thing, maybe it won't matter so much because we'll be up 17 points instead of only up about 3 points. All right, so I'm going to throw that in there real quick. Okay, so this past season we had really high quality starters, but we have some gaps now, right? So there's some players who have come and gone, and it's some spots that really, really needed some work. So of those spots, let's talk about the defensive line, safety positions, the center, the quarterback. All right, so quarterback, Lord have mercy. But let's talk about defensive line first. All right, so we had a player leave for the draft. We've got some players who are graduating, got some players leaving, doing all kind of stuff, right? So we ended up bringing in Blunt, and we brought in Justin Scott. So those are 2 5 stars that came in for the defensive line. Got to respect that, but I don't know how soon these guys are going to be able to be major impacts as far as the game goes. And I know a lot of y'all going to be saying, well, look at Bain. But Bain is not a normal situation, man. Like, that does not typically happen where you've got a player come in and make a strong impact like that. So to expect for these 2 freshmen to come in and make a huge impact, I think we would be crazy. Now, would it be crazy to expect them to play? No, I don't think that's crazy. But I do think it's nuts for us to expect them to come in and both fight each other for the ACC Newcomer of the Year. Like, that's just not realistic. So we've got that, but we don't. So in those 2 players, we've got a lot of talent, but we don't have experience. So I was really glad to see that he brought in those 2 transfers. We got Clark and we got Cook. One from, I think it was, North Carolina State, and then the other is from Middle Tennessee State, I believe it was. So got those 2 recruits to come in. So they don't just bring talent, but they also bring experience. They've gone through a year where they're lifting weights all season. They've gone through a year where they've done Division I scouting. They've done all of that. So that's really important. I thought that was a big move for the Hurricanes to bring those two players in. Not just the two recruits, the 5 stars, but also those two transfers. Okay, let's talk about the safeties, because that is the part that scared me. Well, the quarterback position scared me more than anything, but right outside of that was the safeties, because I'm on record as saying that I thought we had the top safety tandem in the country. So we do have a transfer that came from Vanderbilt, Savion Riley. He is a sophomore, so we're going to be able to utilize him for a couple of years, if not 3 years. That's a big deal, right? He'll be able to grow within the organization, learn what we're wanting him to do, and develop over time. It won't just be like a 1 year rental or a 1 year lease or whatever you want to call it. He's a 3-star recruit coming out of college or coming out of high school. So he's not just, he's not a world beater. But I will say this, he's got experience playing against high-level teams. He played in the SEC. He played, I think he started 2 games. I think he started 2 games. He had like 48 tackles last year. So he's got experience. That's the one thing I do love. If you look at our current roster, the players who were next up, and thankfully we'll get to see those players play in this bowl game coming up here soon. But the players who are next up behind these two really good safeties that we had in Kitchens and Williams, they were both redshirt underclassmen. Redshirt underclassmen is who we had coming in for next year. They didn't have a whole lot of experience, so I was not. I was really hoping not to go into the season having to start either one of those two guys. I would prefer to have somebody come in with experience like Savion Riley. But he's just one safety. We'll see what we have to do with the other one, because both of the safeties appear to be gone, which is a tough deal. The center position, we were really struggling there because our all ACC center ended up leaving, going to the NFL, which I think was the right decision for him to do. But he ended up going into the draft. So we ended up bringing Zach Carpenter from Indiana, also another person who has experience playing. Wide receiver depth, I think that this is one of those positions, man, where I don't think you can have enough of them, because there are times where you put 5 receivers on the field at once. So, I mean, having 7 to 8 receivers on a team is just not enough. So bringing in the best receiving class that maybe we've ever had was a huge deal. I thought that was real cool. One of them, quote unquote, got away. I don't even want to talk about him. He went to Ohio State, but the class that we actually got as far as these wide receivers killed it. I think they killed it with that. So the quarterback, that one is still TBD, and that's not TVD as in Tyler Van Dyke. This is to be determined. So overall, what I think this coaching staff has done with with this whole like recruiting cycle, I'll just call it a recruiting cycle, I honestly would give them like an A minus, maybe a B plus. The only reason why I would say that is because they did do this really big risk, really big reward, try to, this game plan they got going with the quarterback situation, and it's looking like there's a strong possibility that it could shoot us in the foot. Outside of that, I think they have killed this whole recruiting cycle. I think they've killed it. They didn't do it nearly as much as I thought they would in the transfer portal, which is fine, but they're bringing in some really highly recruited talent. They got a couple of flips that was real clutch. Love to see that. So what are my concerns with this? Obviously, the quarterback position is one of my concerns. That's just obvious. I think every Miami Hurricanes fan can say that. My other concern, which is something that the coaches really can't even do anything about, it's this new mindset that student athletes have. Brand new mindset, and it came alive a couple years ago once the transfer portal got super hot. And it is this mindset that says, if I don't start or if I don't play a whole bunch my first year, I'm leaving. So that is my biggest concern, is like we're bringing in a lot of these coaches, we're bringing in a lot of this talent, a whole lot of talent everywhere. But if you bring in a number one recruiting class and let's say you have 27 recruits that's coming in, what good does that recruiting class do next year if half of those players get into the transfer portal and leave because they didn't play as much as they wanted to? You know what I'm saying? So that's my biggest concern is how do we get to the point where Alabama or Georgia, any of these teams, where they stacked these talented classes on top of one another. They just get number one recruiting class this year, then number three in the year after that, and then number two the year after that. So how do we do that while keeping these players on the staff, even though they're not playing as much as they would hope to play? You get what I'm saying? So that's my biggest concern is getting these players like, I don't know, JoJo Trader, bringing JoJo Trader in, and like that's a big get. We all excited about that, right? But what good does JoJo Trader do if we bring him in right now and then he only plays a few snaps this year, and then next year he transfers to University of South Florida? And then it's like, well, we did have a really good recruiting class in 2023 or 2024, but half of those players aren't on the roster anymore. So that's my biggest concern is like, how does the coaching staff bring in all these high level players who I'm sure got promises from all over the country of being able to play immediately? How do you bring them in, keep them happy while still winning games, and keeping them happy enough to stay around long term? That's my biggest concern. I'm really curious to see what y'all's thoughts are on that. Are you concerned about that at all? The reason why I am, like I said earlier, is this is the new mindset. I just call it the transfer portal mindset. And that is, I'm a freshman. If I don't play right now, I'm going to spend my sophomore year somewhere else. That's just the way that people are operating right now. So that's those are my concerns as a quarterback, and then keeping the depth, like keeping those high level players on the roster for 3 or 4 years. We'll see if it happens. I don't know. Transfer portal is probably going to change quite a bit the next couple of years anyway, so who knows. But that's pretty much all that I have for you today. I always appreciate you watching the video. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as I always say at the end of my videos, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I truly appreciate that. God bless. Take care. Peace.